Hello and welcome to the news button. What if India's next big strategic advantage is not another supersonic missile, but a drone that can fly hundreds of kilometers, loiter over the battlefield, find its target, and then turn itself into a precision kamikaze weapon? Meet Divyastra, developed by Indian defense startup HOVERIT. Divyastra Mk-1 is an indigenous tactical loitering munition designed for a combination of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and precision strike missions. And its significance could go far beyond being just another drone. Because if Divyastra evolves as projected, India could be entering an era where long range precision strike becomes more distributed, more persistent, and potentially far less expensive than relying exclusively on conventional missile systems. So forget Brahmos? Not quite. But understand Divyastra and you begin to understand how India's future battlefield could be changing. Let's first separate fact from projection. On 1st June 2026, HOVERIT conducted an operational demonstration of Divyastra Mk-1 in the Jodhpur desert region in the presence of senior army officials. The system was launched repeatedly from a vehicle-mounted mobile launcher. According to HOVERIT, the demonstration included ISR missions, real-time transmission of intelligence to the ground control station, and terminal dive attack profiles. The company also reported successful operation in temperatures exceeding 50 degrees and strong desert winds. HOVERIT currently lists the Mk-1 with a claimed 500-kilometer range and 5-hour flight time. Other published specifications report approximately 15 kilograms of payload, with AI-assisted navigation and target recognition capabilities. That combination is important because Divyastra isn't simply a drone carrying a bomb. It is conceived as a multi-role unmanned strike platform. It can potentially search, it can potentially observe, it can potentially identify, it can potentially wait, and then it can strike. That ability to loiter before committing to the attack is one of the fundamental advantages of a loitering munition. So, why Divyastra could be a game changer? Consider the conventional missile. You identify a target, you launch the missile. It travels to the target, the mission ends. A loitering munition introduces another dimension: time. The weapon can potentially remain in the operational area, search for a target, and wait for an opportunity. That makes it particularly interesting against mobile or fleeing targets. Command posts, radar installations, logistic nodes, communication infrastructure, air defense assets, vehicles, and other high valued battlefield targets. But there is an even bigger advantage: numbers. And more importantly, cost. A country can potentially deploy large numbers of comparatively inexpensive unmanned systems rather than relying exclusively on a small inventory of expensive missiles. That opens the door to a fundamentally different concept: mass plus persistent plus precision. And that is exactly where Divyastra could become truly disruptive. So, why Divyastra could be a serious problem for our adversaries like Pakistan and China? Now, imagine the India Pakistan battlefield. The geographical distances are relatively short, the potential target set is extensive, and the battlefield increasingly depends upon sensors, communications, air defense systems, and mobile command networks. A 500 kilometer class platform, if its published range is achieved operationally, could potentially provide substantial standoff reach from Indian territory. That means without having to cross the Pakistani border, virtually Indian armed forces can strike very deep inside Pakistan. Almost the entire width of Pakistan comes within its range. But the real advantage isn't simply 500 kilometers. Divyastra is a combination of range plus endurance plus mobility plus ISR plus precision strike. A mobile launcher could further complicate an adversary's effort to locate the launch system. Long endurance could allow the drone to remain relevant after launch. ISR capability could help provide battlefield intelligence. And a strike configuration could turn reconnaissance into action. That changes a potentially powerful sensor to shooter chain. And if future versions can be produced in large numbers, the psychological effect would be enormous. Pakistan would not merely have to worry about a handful of incoming missiles, it could potentially have to defend against persistent unmanned threats operating across a much larger battle space. That is a completely different problem. But here is why Brahmos still matters. Calling Divyastra a Brahmos killer would be sensational, but technically misleading. Brahmos and Divyastra occupy different technological and operational niches. Brahmos is a high-speed precision missile. Divyastra is an unmanned loitering strike platform. Brahmos offers speed, a large conventional warhead, and a very different penetration problem for an adversary. Divyastra offers something else: persistence. A missile races towards its target. A loitering munition can potentially search for its opportunity and wait. So the future may not be Brahmos or Divyastra. It could be Brahmos and Divyastra. Brahmos for high-value, time-critical targets, Divyastra-type systems for persistent surveillance, target hunting, and distributed precision strike. That combination could be far more formidable and deadlier than either system operating alone. Let's have a look at the China question. Now we reach the much bigger strategic question. Could Divyastra make a difference against China along the Himalayan frontier? The answer is potentially, but not in the way many headlines might suggest. The Himalayas present a unique military environment. Terrain is difficult, weather is extreme, road infra is limited in many sectors, targets can be dispersed, logistics become extraordinarily important. This is precisely where unmanned systems can provide enormous value. A long endurance UAV can potentially conduct surveillance without risking a pilot. A loitering munition can potentially remain available for a target that appears only briefly. And mobile launch systems can provide flexibility. For India, such systems could complicate artillery, rockets, conventional UAVs, cruise missiles, and air power. And there is another dimension: the psychological and logistical pressure. If an adversary knows that mobile Indian units possess hundreds or eventually thousands of autonomous or semi-autonomous strike drones, every command post, radar, ammunition dump, and logistics concentration potentially becomes more vulnerable. That forces dispersal. It forces camouflage. It forces movement. It forces additional air defense. And all of that costs a lot of resources. This is what makes unmanned warfare so powerful. You don't always have to destroy the enemy's system. Sometimes you can force the enemy to spend enormously to protect its own resource. Let's come to the really interesting part of Divyastra. And that is not Divyastra Mk-1, it is Divyastra Mk-2. And now comes the part that could transform the story. HOVERIT is developing a Divyastra Mk-2 too. But this distinction is extremely important. The Mk-2 figures being discussed publicly should be treated as development targets or reported ambitions, not as capabilities already demonstrated by Mk-1. HOVERIT is targeting a range of approximately 2000 kilometers and payload capacity up to 80 kilograms for the Mk-2. If achieved, that would represent a dramatic expansion over the Mk-1. Think about what that means. A 2000-kilometer class unmanned strike platform would move Divyastra from being primarily a tactical battlefield system toward a much broader long-range theater strike capability. And that is where the strategic implications become enormous. But we must emphasize Mk-2's reported 2000-kilometer range and 80-kilometer payload are projected figures, not capabilities already demonstrated, as has been done by Mk-1. That distinction is crucial. Let's come to the Bangladesh and Myanmar, the eastern dimension of Indian security. What about India's eastern neighborhood? Here again, restraint is important. Divyastra should not be portrayed as a weapon designed to attack Bangladesh or Myanmar. But given a situation, India can switch on Divyastra. India's relationship with both countries is far more complex than a simple military equation. But from a defense planning perspective, India's eastern frontier presents its own surveillance and security challenges. The northeast has difficult terrain. There are long borders. The real revolution is not about the weapon alone, it is the cost of warfare. Perhaps Divyastra's most important contribution isn't its maximum range. It is the possibility of changing the economics of precision warfare. Why fire an extremely expensive missile at every target if a lower cost unmanned system can accomplish the mission at a fraction of the cost? Why expose a fighter pilot when an unmanned platform can perform the reconnaissance? Why deploy a larger aircraft when a mobile launcher can reach an autonomous system closer to the battlefield? And why defend against the missile when the future battlefield could contain dozens or hundreds of networked unmanned systems? This is why loitering munitions are becoming such an important part of modern warfare. The future battlefield is moving from platform versus platform towards network versus network. Let's discuss India's next big leap in the field of drone warfare. And as you know, it is not about individual drones, but a swarm of drones. And this is perhaps where Divyastra becomes even more interesting. Public descriptions of Mk-1 include AI-enabled autonomous navigation, target recognition, and swarm-related capabilities. Imagine multiple unmanned systems operating as a coordinated force. One observes, another relays information, another searches, another acts as a decoy, another attacks. So they work off like a well-coordinated gang. That is no longer simply a drone. That is a distributed combat architecture. And India is only beginning to explore the possibilities. The final verdict. So should India forget Brahmos? No. Should India take Divyastra seriously? Absolutely. Because Brahmos represents one philosophy of precision warfare: speed, power, and high-end kinetic effect. Divyastra represents another: persistence, autonomy, intelligence, and mass. And if India's defense industry can combine those capabilities with AI, satellite connectivity, electronic warfare, swarming, and battlefield networking, something much bigger could emerge. A military where the enemy does not know whether the next threat is coming from the sky, the missile battery, the fighter, the drone swarm, or an autonomous loitering munition waiting silently hundreds of kilometers away for a kill. That is the real strategic promise of Divyastra, not the replacement of Brahmos, but the creation of an entirely new layer of India's precision strike arsenal. If Divyastra Mk-2 eventually delivers anything close to its publicly projected specifications, then India's unmanned warfare story could become every bit as consequential as its missile story. Because the next war may not be won by the country possessing the biggest missile. It may be won by the country capable of putting the greatest number of intelligent, persistent, survivable weapons into the battlefield at the lowest sustainable cost. And that is why the rise of Divyastra deserves India's and its adversaries' very close attention. Before leaving, leave your comments in the comment section. And do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Thanks for watching.